Hey guys, what's up? I want to talk to you about my top 5 favorite units from RTS games that I've ever played. I've played something like 35 different RTS in my lifetime. I went through the list of all the RTS releases, and there's several new RTSs coming up this year that I'm really looking forward to. RTSs have changed my life. From the first one in 1991, Populous 2, The Trials of the Olympian Gods, to the game that literally changed my life and gave me a career, and I even found my wife through it, Warcraft 3. 35 RTSs and more coming this year or next, such as Dwarf, Zero Space, Tempest Rising, Godsorn, Stormgate, Homeworld 3, Immortal Gates of Pyre, Manor Lords, and perhaps more. RTS by now is more of a niche genre, but it is one of the genres that I love the most. Now, as these new games are coming out and we've got new unit designs being presented to us in some of these promising RTSs, it begs the question, what is good unit design and what are good RTS units to play around with? I look for qualities such as play and counterplay, being able to use them in creative ways and then also being able to counter them in creative and satisfying ways as well. And with that in mind, here is my top 5 favorite units of all time from RTSs that I've played. To begin with, the Reaver. The Reaver from Starcraft 1
stupid game.
Is a very interesting unit that shoots projectiles that can explode massively.
Oh, those mines don't hit, huh?
And kill many units at the same time.
Yeah. No, I believe it.
I love the Reaver. It is a fragile, slow shooter, artillery shooter that can be transported around with the shuttle. It is not very strong by itself, but can be flown around with a shuttle in order to give it bonus mobility.
It's bullshit.
It was
expensive. Literally the greatest scarabs anyone ever hit every time.
It is one of the most expensive units to make, as you need to preload its artillery projectiles by spending money to buy scarabs, and then the scarab actually follows a pathfinding, so it tries to actually walk like a unit and travel around on the map to try and make its explosion.
If it hits, shuttle flying around. Yeah, okay. No,
it's so
I don't
cool.
buy it. That's actually a luck game.
No, it's really cool. I love scarabs. I love scarabs. The funny thing is they can miss. If they travel too far away, the Reaver shots, they can actually miss. You can also, of course, try to dodge.
That's stupid game.
And not keep all your units together and clumped up. And they lead for some very interesting and fun harassment in StarCraft 1. I think StarCraft 1 unit design overall was one of the best in the game. In any game ever. I think StarCraft 1 pacing is just amazing. The battles are both really good in small scale and in large scale combat, due to a combination of a good engine, but also a bad engine. The Reaver, of course, has a very powerful attack. You fly it around to make up for its slow movement, but it does have a bunch of counters. If you split, if you shoot it down from afar with tanks and dragoons, if you kill or try to stop the shuttle, all of these are ways to take care of it. So I think the Reaver is one of my favorite units ever, just as much as something like the Swarm Host or the Brood Lord from StarCraft 2 are some of my least favorite units, because they lead to situations where there's almost no counter to them. I think Reaver's doing it right. That's number 5. Next up. Actually, I haven't numbered them. I haven't ordered them. Next up is the Raiders. Raider units are a very flexible and cool unit that are pretty weak in direct combat. There are very few units that Raiders directly beat, but they're relatively fast. They have a cooldown based ensnare that locks down enemy units, which is very strong in an RTS, which has pretty much no dispel, except the Blood Mage from the human faction can cast Banish to remove it. You can also dodge it with certain disjoint mechanics. And the Raider has a siege attack, which means it's extra good against buildings. It really fits into the lore of being able to quickly take down buildings, but perhaps they're not as good in a direct fight. Here's one replay where I use Raiders with an offensive teleport in as I make a tiny Great Hall, which is a main base like an HQ. And you can teleport towards it, you can take down a base, and then you can run away after the opponent doesn't have a base anymore. Raider is one of those units that is as good as you are good. You cannot just attack move with them. If you do, they're going to lose to almost everything, including militia and footmen, some of the weakest cannon fodder units in the game. but when used well, they become one of the most useful units in the game. And I like that. There's a lot of skill expression. They're mobile. They demobilize the opponent. And yeah, I think it's one of the coolest units there is. Then next up is the Shaman. The Shaman, also from the Orc faction in Warcraft 3, is also very flexible. He's got many different facets, and some of his abilities are even usable in multiple different ways. So the Shaman has the Purge ability. And Purge is basically a 100% movement slow that has a diminishing effect over time. So it's a decaying slow. Initially, it practically roots a normal unit, whereas it applies a large slow against enemy heroes. So you can use it for crowd control effects. The crowd control effects is a collection of abilities that do lockdown, like slow, root, stun, silence, etc. And after you purge someone, as you can see, this Demon Hunter has been purged. So here he's moving at full movement speed. He gets purged, can't move much. You can purge him again if you want to slow him down. And then you get to the second ability. And by the way, the purge also functions as a dispel, removing negative buffs and positive buffs on enemy and ally units alike. So that's already like 3 different utilities from a single spell, which I think is super cool. The Shaman is very weak in straight up fights. He costs 2 food, but he has very negligible damage against almost anything in the game. And then you get the second ability, which is Lightning Shield. Lightning Shield is an aura effect you can cast on allies and enemies alike, and it will do 20 damage to everyone around that unit per second, to allies and enemies alike. So you can either cast it on the opponent, forcing them to split their own units, or you cast it on one of your tanking units, you send it in, and then you make sure that you put your unit inside of theirs to cast the area of effect splash damage. In this game, you see me casting Lightning Shield on the opponent's Druids of the Talon, and the opponent is then forced to fly up his Druids of the Talon to become a bird, which makes them effectively a different unit, and also stops the Lightning Shield effect. So you see there's a very interesting play and counterplay. Just casting Lightning Shield is easily done, but that can then become a double-edged sword, as they can use the unit that you cast it on to stand inside yours. Now I'm taking damage from his unit from my own Lightning Shield. The other counterplay is they become a bird. The other counterplay is they can split their army instead of standing together. And then as I send in my Lightning Shielded unit, they can try to dodge it and split away from him. Or maybe they can root my unit or slow my unit so that I cannot get it inside of their army. So I cannot think of many abilities that are as creative and as interesting and as double-dimensional as the Shaman unit. Next up, Starcraft 1, the Firebat. Firebat is also a multifaceted unit. So the Firebat is good at dealing damage in a small area of effect. He's best against biological units, worse against mechanicals. One thing I never knew when I was a StarCraft 1 player, not professional by the way, is that there were damage types. Like, I kind of saw that some things work better against others, but the damage type system actually makes Firebats less effective in some situations than in others. Now, Firebats, of course, are going to be extra good at taking down units like Marines and Zerglings and Hydralisks, but their range is relatively short. So whereas the Marine is more versatile, you've got something like the Firebat that really has a purpose, a niche. And that is important when looking at unit design and units in RTSs, that everyone has a purpose. Not every unit needs to be equally good as another one, but there needs to be a purpose. And the second purpose is that although Firebat is semi-ranged and Marine is ranged, that range doesn't qualify as ranged for the purpose of the Dark Swarm ability. Here in a game of StarCraft 1, you see the orange cloud. That is the Dark Swarm ability by the Zerg Defiler, which is also a very interesting unit and one of my favorites, though didn't make this list. Marines cannot hit anything under the Dark Cloud, under the Dark Swarm cloud, because that's what it is designed to do. It repels ranged attacks. But the Firebat's attack is different. They actually can continue to deal damage under the Dark Swarm, and because of that, they fill a very important niche of being able to keep fighting in the dark. And of course, they're also going to do really good damage against Zerglings and Hydralisks. So whereas Marines will need to try and focus other things, Firebats can fight in the dark. And I just think they're one of the coolest units. Also, their flair, their flavor, their atmosphere is just fantastic. From the very first StarCraft 1 opening cinematic, where you see the Firebat take down a couple of Zerglings, as well as just their voice acting and how badass they are. Need a light? One of the greatest units that I've ever played with. Then, finally, I've had the Reaver, the Raider, the Shaman, and the Firebat. I harken back to an RTS that I played a long time ago, and one of the most meaningful RTSs in my RTS playing enjoyment ever, Dungeon Keeper. Dungeon Keeper 2. You've got the Horned Reaper, accompanied by a rock and roll track. The Horned Reaper can be summoned by sacrificing several other units in this gothic, it feels good to be bad RTS that came out probably over 30 years ago by now. Let me take a quick look at notes. Dungeon Keeper 2. Dungeon Keeper 1 came out in 1997. Dungeon Keeper 2, 1999. Oh, that's not so bad. 25 years ago. The Horned Reaper is one of the most powerful units in Dungeon Keeper 2. He's very pissed off. He has got a very high health pool, very high damage. He can walk through lava without taking damage, but he becomes dissatisfied very easily. So he's also a double-edged sword, or scythe, if you will. If you don't present him with constant stimulation, he will get angry. He will get mad, he will get bored, and he'll start going on a killing spree against your own units. If the Dungeon Keeper has no enemies, and you don't place him in the temple to pray, and you don't constantly give him money, he's gonna go kill all of your own denizens of your dungeon. So, yeah, unleashing him at the wrong time without immediately winning the game with it was usually suicide. And when I was playing back then, I didn't know you should drop him in the temple or give him money in order to make his anger amount drop down. I played this game when it came out, but I didn't understand it at all. I understood enough, and I mean, it was an amazing game. You also, I remember you were not allowed to slap him. He also got angrier when you carried him around in your hand, because you can pick up units in Dungeon Keeper and drop them elsewhere. One of Bullfrog's greatest games ever. The Horned Reaper rounds out my top 5 favorite units in RTSs of all time. What are your favorite units in various RTSs that you've played? Perhaps from games such as Command & Conquer, The Settlers, Lords of the Realm, Spellforce 3, Age of Mythology, Age of Empires, or otherwise. And thanks for watching. Let me know what's your favorite unit, and I'll see you next video.